And so you're listening to KKUP Cupertino 91.5 FM on your dial, streaming on the World Wide Web, kkupfm.org. You can download the free app for better listening. I'm your host, Lupe Luján Montes de Oca, one of the ladies in the Latin Collective, Latino Broadcasting, and this is El Barrio Nuevo. My guests today are Dr. Ramon Martinez, Dr. Gregorio Mora Torres, and hanging around with me today is Manuel Vasquez. Also, he'll have some questions, and they will be sharing their thoughts on the news of the day, the devastating allegations pointing to an iconic figure that hundreds of us admired, looked up to, supported in the fight for better conditions in the farm working field. And Dr. Martinez states that our heroes have fallen and they are rapidly erased. What can we do to preserve our history and recognize those who made the achievement possible, yet invisible in the background? It takes many to create a movement. Dr. Martinez, Dr. Mora Torres have a wealth of historical knowledge and information. They will walk us through some history facts, and I'm very excited to hear what they have to say, and I know you do too, so don't touch that dial. Let's see, the first question created by Dr. Ramon Martinez, Secretary at La Raza Historical Society of Santa Clara Valley, and much, much more than that, an educator here in Santa Clara Valley. We've all heard the latest news that the allegations pointing to an iconic figure that hundreds of us have admired, followed, and supported. The accusations are very serious. It feels like a loss, of a role model. And so our heroes have fallen and they are rapidly erased. What can we do to preserve our history and recognize the many people in the background who made the achievement possible? So take it away, Dr. Martinez. Tell us your thoughts.
Buenos días, todas y todos.
Buenos días.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ramon Martinez, and I knew it. I'm sorry. I want to start off by talking about the historic times that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
We're in something that some people call, we're in the era of cancel culture, of instant justice, of instant shaming people who are doing things we don't like. And when I was a kid, my mother or my dad would, back in Bakersfield,
Yeah.
they say, ¿Dónde andas? Andas jacaleando.
Mm-hmm.
Jacaleando.
Oh yeah, I grew up with that.
Casita to the other, picking up chisme. Okay? So in those days, chisme, you'd pick it up. But it took a while for the chisme to get around. In today's world, because of this internet, chisme hits millions of people in one day, in 1 hour. And so we're in a world where, we used to think about innocence of proven guilty, your trial by jury, all that good stuff.
Yes.
It's all being pushed aside a little bit in our present time. And basically, one of the biggest reasons it's being pushed aside, I want to focus on today, is the women's rights movement. Is that this is a time, right now they refer to it as the Me Too culture. But for about the last 15, 20 years, we've been dealing with the rights of women and the way they are treated in our society. And So everything today, to me, is going to be, it's about around that's going on right now in our culture. Then, moving on Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday the 19th of March, it's not even a month ago, we woke up and there was a headline in the paper that the San Antonio News said that an Eastern newspaper was going to publish a story about Cesar Chavez and about some sexual abuse allegations. Then the problem that very day was that the United Farm Workers stated they were disappointed hearing this, they didn't know what it was, but they were canceling all Cesar Chavez holiday activity. So I want to point that out. The opposition didn't cancel. The United Farm Workers canceled immediately. And then, that very same day, March 19, Dolores came out and said some allegations about Cesar Chavez. One single day, March the 19th. By March the 20th, videos from the New York Times, columns, stories were all over the media. And within 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, boom, erase Cesar Chavez's picture, cover the statue, get rid of the mural, burn the books in 1 day. And so here we are. So, you know, those two heroes of ours, they're our familia. Those of us who are from the 1970s, those of you who are from the 1960s and 70s, or your parents or your grandparents from the 60s or 70s, they were our tío and tía. We were nothing until there was this farm worker movement. It wasn't the only thing going on, but these people were leading it, and they did something with that movement that shaped all of us. At those times, pardon me, I'm thinking here.
There's a lot
In
to
those
cover.
days,
Yes.
there were a lot of movements going on. There was the Farm Worker Union movement. There was the Chicano movement. There was the anti-Vietnam War movement. And there was the women's liberation movement all going on. And they're all going on right now. It's just that they're different from when that happened at the time. So right now, depending on how you feel about him, Cesar, or how you feel about her, Dolores, we're talking about their personal story and their glory or their failings, but what we're concerned about is that they don't erase what they did for this world, and they don't erase the thousands of people who got behind all these movements and have shaped your world right now.
That's right. And we stated earlier that it takes more than one person. Manuel, did you have a question for Dr. Martinez?
Just, can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Not so much a question right now, just thanks for putting it all into context, Dr. Martinez. You covered a lot about, you know, with cancel culture, there's a collective shaming that's instant, right? And people, especially if they're past, can't speak for themselves. We're talking about the women's movement too. You know, women have the right to be heard. Any victim of anything has the right to be heard. At the same time, it is a huge thing to process, because what you said, Dr. Martinez, was how these people were like our tios and like our tias. You know, I remember growing up in the early 90s, and I had the Uvas No VHS tape, you know, that was passed around just to spread awareness to what was happening out in the fields. So with these two pillars of of our community stood for was organization, leadership. They were like family. We had pictures in our houses, or some people did. I remember seeing that. And they were really tied into the Chicano education movement as well. So I'm curious to see what both of you, both guests here have to say about where the movement can continue to go, and to what extent will this hinder the movement, because it is important to remember what these two people did. Any allegations, any victims need to be heard, but at the same time, these people did a lot for representation, and I'm hoping that all that effort doesn't go to waste.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank you, Dr. Martinez. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about this icons of ours,
Well, basically,
tumbling down, so to speak, or they want to...
one of the things I've learned from Dr. Mora Torres is we have two ways of looking at history. One is the great man theory. The great things, great nations are made by great men. Then there's the other idea that says, no, great things or great nations are made by great people. And people are movements, Men lead movements, but people, if there's nobody behind you, you're leading nothing. And so
Women
we
also
don't,
lead movements, don't they?
that's right.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is that right now we're dealing with this. We live in a world of heroes. American culture is very pop culture. The latest singer, the latest dancer, the latest what's on TV. We're constantly about individuals. But right now is a time to look at who we are as a group. Now, regarding the fear that something's going to go away, I fear nothing. What the Raza Chicano movement, women's movement, anti-war movement has done cannot go away. But what I'm talking about is don't be distracted by the current stuff that's out there, because it's actually be conscious that it's chipping away at your story. I'm sitting here today and I'm wearing my huelga hat.
Yes.
And I'm holding up my United Farm Worker flag.
Yes.
And I'm saying we need to remember that if Latinos have a national flag, it's this. And nothing that happened on March the 20th is going to erase this. Because this is not about a person. This is about a big movement.
Yes.
Just like our national anthem, speaking of KKUP, our national anthem across this Southwest is Las Nubes by Little Joe. And let's see who you tell me what's our national anthem, it's not that. So that is ours, and all these things are ours to defend. The other thing I was going to say is back to thinking about what our tío and tía achieved. They changed the mind of America and the world. In the 1930s, laws were passed to give workers rights to collective bargaining, to strike, to form unions, 1930s. In the 1940s, they began to take rights away because they thought unions were getting too much power, and so they took away, they had something called, you have a right not to have a union. States had rights not to have unions if they wanted to pass laws. So our heroes took that on. So again, another thing that I like to say is that we all know that like in India, there's something called the untouchables. It's a class of people, the lowest of the low. And they cannot move out of that class of nothing. And we look at those foreign nations like that, and these tíos and tías made this nation understand we have untouchables. They're called farm workers. They have no rights by this federal government, including to this day. Farm workers have no legal rights to organize in any way. And those two tíos and tías broke down that wall.
All right. Well, on that note there, thank you so much. Wow, we covered quite a bit in those 15 minutes. We have so much history. We had so much history and so little time, right? Yeah. So I want to move on to my next guest, Dr. Gregorio Mora Torres. And well, let's see, you're a historian, Dr. Mora, and lecturer and graduate of Santa Clara University, PhD in Latin American History from University of California, Irvine, and retired from the Mexican American Studies at San Jose State University, and the author of the book titled The Chicano Movement in the Santa Clara Valley, 1960 through 1975. It's an honor to have you here, Professor Mora Torres, and you are also a founding member of La Raza Historical Society of Santa Clara Valley. Now, what can we do? Or you wanted to speak on the farm worker a little bit
Yeah.
more. Uh-huh.
One of the problems that we have in American society, well, actually there's quite a few things, but the big things that the American ethos is centered on the Puritan way of thinking. And Puritans, and Manuel was talking about shunning, and those are all Puritan ways of judging people. In the Puritan way of thinking, you either have saints or you have witches. And what you have in the United States, a time when people were burning witches. And I think that's what has happened to Cesar Chavez. Here we have spent, and this is part of the popular media, radio, television, newspapers in 1960 who finally discovered for the first time a dark-skinned Mexican American who was able to attract the national attention to the plight of the farm workers across the United States. And because the guy was photo savvy, he knew how to manipulate media, he became the face of Mexican Americans. He became the face of farm workers. And so they built him up to the point by where when he died, there's this national movement on the part of local politicians, national politicians, community people, basically acclaiming him into a saint, as a person who can't do any wrong. He's a saintly figure. And all of a sudden, 30 years later, for a variety of reasons, somebody decided to really unleash the truth about Cesar Chavez, the fact that he's not really a saint, that he's actually a person who is actually pretty flawed. But people who work with him ever since the 1960s and 70s realized that he was not a perfect man. You gotta give credit to Cesar Chavez for the fact that he was able to bring out to the national attention the plight of the thousands and thousands of workers who worked in California fields and across the United States. These are the people who are feeding us. Okay? And for the first time, people were able to look at the fact that these people who play such a central role in feeding us are actually out there. And that was Cesar Chavez's great success. Now, he was able to become a part of a movement. But again, when we talk about movements, movements are not built by one person. Movements are built by people. And if you begin to look at the history of farm workers, like you, Lupe, you said that your family comes from Texas, and that they were migrant farm workers at one time. And that is also true for the vast majority of people living in Santa Clara Valley, and for a lot of people in the in California, and for a lot of Mexicanos. we have, our origins are in farm work. We were the people who have been feeding the country for the last 100 years. Okay, and we have fought for a better life, for better wages, for the right to a decent way of life. And every time we have done that, the growers who are a powerful force in California, United States, have always crushed this movement. If you go back to the early 1900s, you're gonna see strikes that are taking place by farm workers that are Mexicano mostly, but there are actually white workers who come from the Midwest, the so-called Okies. You have Filipinos who migrated to the United States in the late 1890s and also became part of the California labor force and part of the labor force in the Pacific West in Arizona. Okay, and then you have a lot of other people, a lot of Mexican migrants, but also a lot of ethnic Mexicans from Texas, from Arizona, from New Mexico, who have been migrating up and down, from Texas all the way to California and all the way to Washington. And so they had gone on a strike, basically seeking fair and just wages. Okay? And so I can give you a list of strikes that became famous, and I can give you some examples. For example, there's a famous Oxnard strike of 1903. Okay? There's the Wheatland strike that was led by a group of people that were called the Wobblies, who are actually people who realize that America's economy is controlled by capitalists. And they believe that in order for workers to stop being exploited and repressed, you had to get rid of capitalism. And so in 1914, they led a famous strike, the Wheatland strike, up in Sacramento, in that area. It was crushed, okay? And then in the 1930s, you have, the Monte Strawberry strike that was led by a Mexican union, Kkup, in Kkup, okay? And then you have the famous Corcoran strike that took place from Bakersfield all the way to Sacramento in 1933. We had thousands and thousands of workers coming out of the fields, insisting on better wages, better housing, okay? And then in the 1950s, you have Ernesto Galarza, the great Mexican farm worker leader who organized before Cesar Chavez, began 1948-49, and he led 20 strikes in the Central Valley. Okay, and so we're talking about thousands and thousands of people from 1900 all the way to the 1960s. Insisting that growers who are, they're not your little farmer. These are big corporations or big family growers who have incredible pull, not only locally, but also statewide and even nationally, who are exploiting not only domestic workers, the people who are working in the United States, who are U.S. born, but also in the 1950s, you have the braceros, who are also being exploited. And so what we're talking here is an incredible, powerful industry that has decided that in order to increase their profits, they have to do it at the expense of these masses of people that are coming from Mexico, from the Southwest. Okay, and every time that they go on strike, most of the strikes end up in failure simply because people need to eat. They can go on strike for maybe a week or 2 weeks, but after that you gotta move, and that's the problem of organizing farm workers. So Cesar Chavez is key here because he was able to bring that plight to the national attention, and that's where when you're trying to make judgments, point out those flaws, point out the fact that the guy was violating young women, young little girls. But you can't also erase the fact that he's central to forming the first national union across the United States. and that he succeeded. Because for the first time, the nation is looking at the plight of its people.
Thank you. Manuel, did you have a?
All of these strikes, you know, some people can see them as a list, like in a page out of a history book, but they really are part of American history. You mentioned the Bracero program. And a lot of the work was not just simply migrants coming here and saying, hey, we want fair treatment, we want, you know, decent working conditions. This was also part of a pool, as you know, I'm sure. It's this wave of need and inclusion. It was a pendulum of America saying, mainly to Mexico, we need you. Come work in our fields. Something happens, we're in a war, that need goes away, go back. But this wave of we need you, we want you, go back, then we need you again. This was also Chavez telling America, you need us, you welcome us here. Make our conditions more conducive to living just like people. My question to you, or to Dr. Martinez as well, is what do you think is important for not just the audience right now, but for people to remember with these movements, and for young people to know about these movements today? Because we're intersecting a lot of things about race, American history, puritanical lenses. We're looking at immigration. We're looking at ICE these days, right? A lot of hot topics. What do you think is important for people to remember about the movements throughout history and where it can continue to go?
Well, the problem is that we're going back to the same old issue. Is about the creation of wealth. Because our culture, even today, is one of the most powerful economies that make up the United States greater economy. And so the question is, you know, we're producing incredible wealth in the fields. The question is, how do you break that wealth and share it? And so all that the workers only want is simply a chance to live a decent way of life, having list a little wages, and having at least a decent way, a decent home to stay at, and at least have a little bit of money so they can send their kids so they can improve their lot. Okay, and that has been true way back then, and it is true today. Because what the United States has done is basically, you're going back to the Bracero program, but you know, the United States has always found ways to exploit farm workers. In the past, it was the domestic workers, and then they realized that, you know, that if you bring in braceros that can be controlled, you know, with bracero, the flow of braceros, you can decide where to send them, how many to send, how much you can pay them. And then when you no longer want them, you can take them back. That is happening today. Right now, the U.S. government, under President Trump, he's been, you know, raiding all those farms in the fields, in Texas, in Arizona, and California. Okay? But he's also bringing them back under special government programs. So it's a return to the old bracero way of life, where you can control the flow, you can decide how much you can pay them, and then when you don't want them anymore, you can kick them back. And the only thing that happens is that these people continue to be exploited, the workers here and the workers in Mexico or Central America now, because the Bracero program now has been extended to people in Central America.
It also depends on which state they're in right now.
Yes.
And what is more advantageous for voting these
Yes.
days. Yeah.
I just came back from a conference.
We have 1 minute.
Okay, just came back from a conference in Texas, the National Association of Chicana Studies. And they have a lot of young farm worker intellectuals who are now going on to pursue PhDs. And some other reports, there's one kid from, and he's a kid because I'm old now, but at one time I was them, who was from Salinas, who's studying at the University of New Mexico. And he came back and did a study. And he estimated, you know, how much that the average worker today out in the fields is making $15 an hour. Okay? And he concluded that that's exactly the same amount that these people were making in 1965 before the union started. $1.65 an hour translates into $15 an hour today. So what has,
Well,
in all this time, what has improved? Nothing.
yeah.
And now we're dealing with toxic chemicals and environmental damage that they're affecting these people. And so we're back to the same place.
Well, why don't we come back at 10:15 after I do my shouts and continue this very interesting conversation. Don't you think so, Manuel?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yes. So, thank you, Dr. Martinez, Ramon Martinez, and Dr. Mora, Gregorio Mora Torres, for being here today. And we're gonna return, like I said, with our conversation after birthday shouts and announcements that we do at the top of the hour at 10 o'clock. And so, stay with us. Regresamos pronto. And so I just want to remind everyone that I'm Lupe Lujan Montes de Oca. This is La Taza del Sabor, Kkup, listener-supported radio, playing the best of the Chicano sound as well as poetry with music, Raza literature, Indigenous America and Latin beats, guests and conversation, and topics that impact our community. All right, we're back. I hate to cut that, Cleo's back. One of my favorites growing up here in Sanjo. All right, so we're back with my guests with a very interesting topic today. I've got Dr. Martinez, Ramon Martinez in the house here, and Dr. Gregorio Mora Torres, historians. They're from La Raza Historical Society, and they're giving their thoughts on a lot of different things, especially dealing with, the news of the day, with the accusations of one of our iconic leaders, both male and female, are in the news. So, and just with that, go ahead and take it away, Dr. Ramon Martinez.
Dr. Mora Torres, one of his comments had to do with the women's role in the farm worker union movement. And I just want to tell people that, it is true that the women have been very, very central to the movement for agricultural rights. In the 1930s, Emma Tenayuca in Texas, Luisa Moreno in the 50s, when our current heroes were in Delano, so was Maria Moreno. There's a documentary, YouTube videos called Adios Amor, where you can learn more about Maria Moreno. The other thing I wanted to talk about is about what's happening right now. You gotta be careful not to take our eyes off the ball. We have never been stronger. We have never had the voice more than we have today. And we have never been a sleeping giant. There's no such thing. We fought always. The idea that we're not united is not true. We're as complex as any complicated, sophisticated culture, so we have all kinds of views. There's no such thing as never united. The last thing I want to say is this. Somebody said, in California, they're not stopping us. In 2030, the public schools with millions of kids are going to require that you have an ethnic studies course before you graduate. And so what our work is what Latino history are they going to learn? Who are they going to learn about? And don't just focus on one or two heroes, because we have thousands of stories. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that. And let's see, we've got some more time here, and I want to give a chance to Dr. Mora, Gregorio Mora Torres, to, what are your thoughts on?
Going back to the history, but also to modern times.
Mhm.
In the 1920s, the Mexicano Latino population in California was incredibly small. And yet, and most of us were forced to work in the fields. There was a lot of racism that kept us from going into construction. There were no plumbers, no electricians, because they were basically segregated jobs. And the only jobs available for Latinos and Mexicanos were basically manual labor, agriculture, construction, railroad work, mining. Okay, and so we need to remember that we have a working class history here. The majority of us come from working class backgrounds. What is incredibly important is the fact that the 1960s, as a result of the civil rights movement, led by Mexicanos, also by Chicanos in the 1960s, it opened the doors for thousands and thousands of people to enter university for the first time. And again, in the 1960s, very few Mexican Latinos went to universities. And so the Chicano movement opened the door for all these people to come in. And for the first time, you have significant people who are now going and becoming teachers, just like Manuel over here, Dr. Ramon Martinez. They all become teachers, thousands of them. And obviously, there's a lot of lawyers, a lot of business people, a lot of social workers. So for the first time, we do have a significant middle class. So things have changed. And not only that, but the population in California has changed dramatically. Before 1950, the vast majority of people in California were white people. Today, white people are disappearing. Their mortality rates are so high that they're being replaced by other people. And so California, for the first time, is a multicultural state, a multi-ethnic state where Latinos and Mexicanos primarily now become majority. And so what that means, and going back to Professor Ramon Martinez's point, that means that most of our kids, most of the people that are gonna graduate from high school and college eventually are gonna be of Latino extraction or Asian or immigrant. And so that means that the history books and the way we teach has to change to reflect the new phase of California, which is multicultural and multiracial, and now even multilingual. And so for historians, we need to go back and basically rewrite the history of the United States. When I was going to college a long time ago, if you were to cover Latin America, you were to cover Mexico in a history book, you probably have little paragraphs here and there. But history was basically taught from a white Anglo-American perspective. And the question is, can you do that now in California? We still have history books in California, they're being taught from a white perspective. When the face of California has changed, we need to make sure that the history of California now reflects all the people who are living here. And so obviously, because at one time, this was part of Mexico, and Mexicanos have been living in California since 1777 in San Jose. We need to change the history to make sure that history that once ignored, not really erased, because we don't erase anything, but has been ignored, now becomes prominent. And obviously we need to go back and rewrite the history to show the incredible contributions that Mexicanos have had in the areas of agriculture. And what that California was basically the largest economic force in California was agriculture.
Mhm.
And we were the major labor force.
Very well said.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of great topics there. A lot of these things are going back to cancel culture. Our people can get canceled really easily. Some people may be hearing, about our progress, our prosperity here, and it can be intimidating because they treat us as other, or they think that or they're not familiar with our customs, our look, our language, our traditions, and things are very much black and white. Like you said earlier, people are treated like saints or like demons, and there's a lot of rhetoric, going around, trying to very much malign us, ostracize us a little bit if it's advantageous to get a vote here or there from people, right? But everything that you just mentioned, Professor, about becoming part of a strong middle class, that's pretty much my family. Half my family, my dad came here from my mom's side. My grandparents came here, but mom was born here, and our humanity is what I think needs to persist. We are here not to take over. If you're hearing about us and you're intimidated by us, we very much just want to be included. And the fact that our population is increasing, I think, is a testament to of where our heart and our intention is. We just want to do better. And this country brought us here. Some of us, you mentioned the Barcelona program. There was an actual government wave to say, hey, let's bring in migrants to work the fields. During World War II, it was a big thing too. We've very much become acclimated, but it's we're looking for inclusion. We're looking for humanity. We're looking for fair treatment, and a lot of that is still at risk after all these years. You mentioned things going back to the 1920s or in the last turn of the century. People think, oh, that's so long ago. I'm like, well, it's repeating itself. It's really cyclical.
It is cyclical, but at the same time, it is also linear. I want to make sure that people understand that Mexicanos were here long before the great orange-haired president was here. And we have been a part of California history since 1777. And because a lot of us have indigenous blood from here, we're mestizo, we're Loni, we have all kinds of other bloods here. And so part of it, if you really want to educate and get rid of all this racial stereotypes, we need to go back and reconstruct the history of California, reconstruct the history of the United States. Because when I was growing up, and Professor Martinez was growing up, we were taught, for the very point, that the father of the United States was good old George Washington. And that Abraham Lincoln liberated the slaves. And there is no history of Mexicanos being told about. Even though we have been here long before, it's the same thing with indigenous people. Indigenous American history starts in 1609, without realizing that the history of the United States goes back to 15,000 years ago or before.
And there's nothing divisive about wanting to be included in the history books. A lot of unfair things happen. Some people may not want to hear that, or think, oh, we will be blamed for that today if we include ethnic studies or include the dark times. We're just asking for there were dark times for our people, but look at all of our achievements too. We want recognition for that as well as part of our contribution to the American fabric.
Yes, and Professor Martinez is when he's talking to you about how in 4 years from now, there's a requirement that ethnic studies has to be taught in California. Every single child in California has to take some knowledge of ethnic studies. which means ethnic history, ethnic cultures. Okay, and that is a better picture of who we should be. Because now people are going to realize, and keep in mind that we live in this, racial rainbow in California. And so everyone's gonna have to realize that you all have a little bit of history there. It's not just white. And that's what I think that's where we need to go.
Thank you very much for that. Very powerful. Thank you, Manuel. Do you have any last words,
May
Dr. Ramon Martinez?
May is History Preservation Month in the United States. This is a good time for you, those of you who are listening, you are history. So this is a good time for you to think about what stories are you going to make sure your kids know about you, or about your grandparents, or about everybody around them. Here in Santa Clara County, I'm also talking about the thousands of Mexican miners who were here in 1860 up on the mountain down in New Almaden. We made this county. We made the economy. We talk about the gold rush, but no. Mercury, cinnabar, is what made this state rich. It was the first corporations in the world, in California, were right here on this mountain. And it was thousands of Mexicans up there who did the work. So pay a little bit of attention to that. There's 2 books out there, El Cinco de Mayo by David Hayes Bautista. And there's also The Devil in Silicon Valley. So go to R.J. Martinez YouTube channel, R.J. Martinez Mexican History, and look for some videos about Cinco and about the devil in Silicon Valley to know about the history right here. Gracias.
All right, thank you so much. And Dr. Mora, you have a couple of books, right? Do you have more than 2?
There's an old book that came out in 2005 on the diaries of actually the journals, kind of a narrative of Jose Maria Amador, who is a Presidio soldier who was serving in San Francisco, and eventually became famous because he reconnoitered basically all of what is now Central Valley, and his soldier fellows went all the way up to Oregon, basically exploring and mapping and naming all the places that we know in California.
Would we call him an early Californian or California? Or
He's a Californian.
Okay.
He's a Californian. And then I have another book that came out, the Chicano movement in Santa Clara Valley. And in next year, there's going to be a book that's going to be published by the University of Nevada Press called The Mexican Colonias in the Santa Clara Valley. Hopefully by November it will come out of 2027. But this year we have a brand new book. I decided to do a little bit of family history, and so I wrote a book on my father's life, and it's called Don Magdaleno's Story, which can be obtained at the Amazon bookstores, electronic bookstores, and I'll be doing several book presentations across the valley in the next few months.
All right, and I know you're retired, so are you lecturing anywhere soon?
Whenever whenever people invite me, I'll be more than willing to come. So and talk to you about history and everything.
What are you doing, Dr. Ramon Martinez, over at the La Raza Historical Society of Santa Clara Valley?
I'm working on putting up some historical markers about juntas patrióticas. There were, in the 1860s, there were 20,000 people, Mexicanos in California, that had these groups called juntas patrióticas. And those groups sent money to Mexico to President Benito Juarez to fight the French invasion. But they also sent money to re-elect Abraham Lincoln to keep this union together, to fight slavery. And people don't know that they sent tens of thousands of dollars in those days for those causas. They also helped raise troops for the Union Army. Again, this is history right here in this county, and people don't know. All they know is we're East Siders, we do low riding, and we're something about farm workers. But our history is extremely deep.
All right, thank you. And Manuel, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course, happy to be here.
Your questions were great as always. Thank you so much. And, you know, thank you all, right, for being here today and sharing with our listeners your knowledge and your studies of our history, the Mexican-American Chicano experience, and telling us about some of our great leaders that they're human beings, right? They're not saints, like you said, Dr. Mora Torres. And, but yet, even though they
All kinds of flaws.
a lot of flaws and everything, but, you know, they managed to build a movement, you know, and achieve many things. Okay.